Welcome to Writers Radio. I'm Carol Harmon, your host for Tender, a poetics of Ekphrasis.
Blue Dot. My phone takes me across town. I nothing but the water blue dot. Effortless, how the blue dot becomes my virtual body. I recognize myself in its glow and follow, feet lecturing the sidewalk. I think of how the blanched garlic clove slips out of its skin, and the bowl fills up with them, pearl white and blue in veins. But in the sink their paper wrappers crinkle, the all of them wanting remembrance, sight. When the blue dot falters and its cone of leading light disappears, the dot grows larger, pulses, blooming with its discontent. What I mean is, the signal is scrambled and I am lost. A sudden and joyous fragment paused in the middle of a leaf-green street. Maybe I am most alive here where the algorithm disappoints and Google has recommended the wrong shirt sleeves, complete in a color that will only wash me out. It is and isn't a shock to find the body is no longer a perfect shape on the flat map of the city. To find oak trees springing up from the earth in vertical lines, hydrangeas the size of two anatomically correct hearts held up by one strong stem. Then to find the body is not blue jeans, though it is a mistake I often make, choosing not to look closely at whatever is closest to me. I return to the hidden skeleton of my body slowly, as if re-entering a dream. The sun is hot in my eyes. Wind disrupts the neatness of my hair. Buses pull over, but I am not getting on. Doors open, close. I wave the buses off, drivers showing their teeth. I show my own. My body on a bus stop bench is a place of high drama, a blip in the system, not doing what it's meant to. I sit with hands on my thighs, and below or within are two hollow bones, cascading with marrow, blood, two valleys where something, cold blue stream, runs through. Imagine that. The wild of my body loosed and tumbling. I kick a pebble into the street. Overhead, the buzz of the trolleybus cables is the contented buzz of bees beating their air-thin wings. Restored to its good health, my phone tells me drones are expelled from the nest. Sent away, they stay away. The hive continues without them. And the drones, where do they go? A beekeeper on the East Coast says the bodies of drones are found dead in her grass. They are born into cells that look like bullets and have no fathers, she writes. I can feel the sadness of her story in my body if I want to. Sadness in the body is a basket of wet-shelled peas, bells with no answer, dark rooms with darkening windows. But my body is living and dying apart from the bees, a fine machine I don't yet know all the parts to. The sun filters down, a simple pattern playing on my skin. I don't confuse it for a part of me. In my hand, the phone stirs and sings out.
Alison Braid-Fernandez is a Canadian poet from London, England. Her poem, Blue Dot, was included in the prestigious Montreal Poetry Prize Anthology 2022. Alison, how do you see Blue Dot in terms of lineage and writerly influences?
I wrote this poem as I was reading Dorothea Lasky's book Animal, which is a collection of essays based around ghosts, colors, animals, and bees. At least two influences made their way into the poem. One was the line we just heard, "My body on a bus stop bench is a place of high drama," which came from Lasky's line, "The eye of a poem is a place of high drama." There's also an essay in the book about bees, and those bees make their own way into the poem. I think this writerly influence is more apparent than it would usually be in my work, but at the same time, all of my writing is in dialogue with the writers I've read. I take something from every text that I read.
You have also lived in Prague and write about lineage in the past, as in the next poem.
Fear of desire. Just this morning, Yulia scraped frost from the swing set into my mittened hands, saying, "Snow," the word from that morning's flashcard, with its perfect, cool geometry, and waited for me to toss it up, make it fall down as snow, as it never had before. "She's performing a miracle," you tell Yulia, though we are all outside of language and understanding, only the miracle joyous between us, not needing our thought or description. Leaving work, we stop in the underpass where carp are swimming, thick bodies flickering in deep green buckets. In 2 weeks it's Christmas. Soft round mouths leap towards the hose's fresh water. My face becomes the blank moon of the underpass spilling over them. You point, choosing your fish, and a man leans forward with a flashing knife, an apron stiff with blood. The carp is luminous, white and pearled as rice. Our desires surface and show their bright underbellies. First want is the method, then we are. Lightly it begins to snow. When I think about lineage, I think about the writers I surround myself with and who I learn from. Those are writers I find through their books, but also my friends who are writers. All of my writing is indebted to them. You yourself come from a lineage of photographers. I'm curious how you find yourself thinking about lineage in your own work.
My grandfather, Byron Harmon, was a well-known wilderness photographer in the Canadian Rockies in the early 20th century. As a third-generation Harmon photographer, I have always felt an obligation to represent his work and keep it alive in modern terms. This I've done through a number of projects working with museums and publishing and galleries. But also, increasingly, I'm looking at his work through my own writing.
I'm curious about your own process. As both a writer and a photographer, what does your process look like?
I work intuitively as both writer and photographer. I take cues from the natural world, but also from happenings, something I've read in the news, a book, other people's art and writing. With my poems, most of the subjects come from the natural world, an animal or a plant in relationship to a specific situation, sometimes personal and sometimes a more public occurrence.
My process is rarely the same 2 days in a row. In terms of the basics, I sit down every morning when I can. I read and I write. For a long time, I felt I had to keep myself in the chair even if my mind wasn't lighting on anything, finding a voice or an image. Recently, I've tried to be more generous with myself, and time spent thinking or letting my mind drift is still part of my writing time, part of my process. I let myself get out of the chair. I've started to do a lot of walking. We live next to the old site of a palace, where only the stairs of the palace remain, as well as a massive park with a maze in the center, many ponds, some very old Victorian-era dinosaurs, and large open grassy spaces. I walk through the park and my mind usually turns to writing. Sometimes I write down what I'm thinking, but it's quite rare that I ever return to those notes even though they feel important at the time. I think the things I'm thinking about aren't exactly lines to be committed to paper, but I find that something shakes loose during a walk, and when I return I can sit down to write again, and I know what's been missing from a piece. I also listen to a lot of podcasts. I like listening to historians and writers. I visit museums. I'm terrible for eavesdropping, and sometimes the most wonderful lines I've found sitting on the top of a double-decker bus going into the city. Moving Continents, After Chocolat Klaus by Leonetto Cappiello. On a train into the city, I paid for a ticket that decreed my body could take up space. I paid for 2 tickets that said my suitcases could stand upright beside me. Cutting across fields of yellow flowering plants, I understood my body as a debt I would go my whole life paying off. Beside the field, a girl called for her father, her voice resting on an updraft of wind. She summoned a kite and a tree. Entanglement arose. I was in 2 minds about belonging to a place, wondering where I belonged and if anything could ever really belong to me. On the side of the train was an old advertisement for chocolate. A woman in green rode astride a red horse. In her hand, the reins were 2 blue rivers wrestled from land and held up to the light. Both horse and rider lifted their feet off the ground, tethered to nothing and no one but each other. I gripped the handles of my little suitcases tightly, containers of my entire life. The woman was smiling. She had tamed rivers and tasted chocolate. I looked for the horse's expression, but his mouth remained in her hands.
Alison, your recent poetry has been concerned with ekphrasis. Would you please comment on that process and how you became to be drawn to it?
I started writing ekphrastic poems based on a prompt called Ekphrasis Yourself by Jennifer Nelson, which can be found on woodlandpattern.org. It was during the pandemic, and I was really missing the experience of looking at art. So I would give myself virtual gallery days where I walked digitally through usually a big American art gallery, and I would land on one artist whose work, for whatever reason, caused me to pause. Now that I'm living in London, I try to visit a few galleries a month. They're mostly free here, which is unbelievable. I think it's so important, the opportunity to have art as part of your daily life. When I'm at a gallery, I take pictures of the work that resonates with me, a picture of the artwork description. At home or at the gallery, I make notes. I write about the painting in very concrete terms. The literal objects, scene, brushstrokes, or colors. Usually I research the painting, the painter. Those details often begin to make their way into the poem. I don't try to construct a poem right away. I let my notes sit for a while and come back to it when my mind latches onto it again. I think there's a part of me when I write that often leans into order and neatness, and I find those poems don't always feel very alive. So I've started to use another prompt, also from woodlinepattern.org, called Embracing Confusion by Brian Cherry. I write about the painting or the artwork while listening to music and leafing through the books on my desk. I let lines from the song and lines from the book sift in, and that's where I find something begins to happen when I have so many sources. I have my own mind, the mind of the painter, someone singing, someone else's words on the page, and I find there are these places of overlap. I don't think I'm setting out to do anything particular with Ekphrasis. I don't want to translate a painting into a poem or necessarily describe my own encounter with a painting. I think it's more of a being with. Maybe it is a record of an encounter or a being with, but it's also fractured by the other sources that splinter it and hopefully take away some of the neatness that my mind sometimes leans into.
The body is a focus throughout your recent poems. I notice the recurrence of green and orange, the colors of blood and chlorophyll, which are prominent in the art you have been inspired by, as well as your own poems. For example, in this next poem,
Light Upon the Body, After Luncheon in Room 206 by Adrian Dagg. Next to the mirror in the fairy bathroom was a painting of two girls on a hotel bed. The room was the green I wished I saw on the inside of my eyelids. It was a green that said, interior. How did green, a color so infrequent to the body, sign of sickness and disease, look so warmly internal? That was the mystery the painting told. Sliced open at the head of the bed was a watermelon bearing its softest pink. Looking at it, I was nostalgic for the self before the pain, not this glassy storefront version of me. Over the tinny-sounding speakers came a song that seemed to illuminate the fact that music is noise. What a wonder, I said aloud to the empty stalls, to make noise sound like noise. I wanted to describe the pain I felt in the same illuminating way. The music petered out. Just standing here, I had faced two miracles and remained intact. My body seemed the last mystery to answer. Pain in the body had no image, no outline. My body was in my head. My body was my head. My body was shaking off the rust. My body had grown just a little bit, had walked through sound and sharp objects. My body was dialogue and forgiveness. My body spelled out desire, spelled out coincidence. My body was cosmic and grand. My body was my body. My body, my body. I was ice in the tumbler of my body, an amber liquid. Held in the bathroom mirror, I chimed and chimed and chimed. I started thinking about the body as I was working on my master's in the spring of 2022, and I was writing a lecture as part of my graduation. I decided to write it on the body. I was thinking about the physical body of the writer, which so often goes unnoticed or forgotten as we sit at the desk for hours. And I was also thinking about how that body renders the body on the page. I think I wanted to shake off my attachment to my mind. I wanted to find a way to root myself in the sensations of my body, which was what really propelled me through the day. And my body also became more apparent to me as I encountered sickness and health problems. I started to look at other art practices, contemporary portraiture in particular, to see how other artists were depicting the female body and depicting the female body outside of the male gaze. Green and orange began to surface as wild colors, but also sometimes colors of sickness. There was the orange of medical containers, green of bruises and the internal. I came across the work of the acting teacher and mime Jacques Lecoq, who taught what he called the poetic body, or the imagining body. His imagining body is a body that is a site for transformation. It privileges its own sensations. And coming out of that research, I've been trying to be a better listener when it comes to living in my body. My body is as a physical home. I situate myself in my body and how it feels. I take note of those sensations before beginning to gradually look outwards. So I think the body really led me to ekphrasis in that sense. I was looking for other bodies as well as looking for my own. Nectarine Heart, after Boxed Fruit No. 1, A Nectarine by John Wilde. I was born with a nectarine for a heart. The nectarine hangs suspended in a box the same color as the nectarine. There is a nail and a string, and on the other end the sturdy stem. At first I walked carefully, and then I ran, and then I walked carefully again, for I had felt the fruit inside me bruising. I try to be tender, to be soft. I think that's the law of the body, to be the same as the thing you hold inside. Other girls sing in the change room, and it breaks my nectarine heart, knowing how loud and reckless they can be. Maybe that's why I show no respect to the boys who put their elbows up and work through crowds. I throw an elbow or two. I bloody mouths. A boy takes my arm in his hand. He pretends to steal my pulse, holds it above his head, whooping, hey boys, I got her heart." I take him down easy. I rest my foot on his wrist. I'm my own favorite team player. The school sends me home, and I walk the long way with the dark note spinning in my pocket. My parents have lost their glasses. They stare at me through disappearing eyes. I sit in my bedroom and give myself a pulse. The nectarine looks real in the mirror. Everyone thinks it is. Better a nectarine than to tell the world there's nothing there. A girl born heartless. What is a girl born heartless? A girl, says the mirror, reflection of the window, world. A girl, a girl.
Alison, thanks so much for joining us. It has been a real pleasure working with you. We close this program with one last poem.
Oranges, after Aaron Armstrong's Between Two Minds. Come winter, the sky is a white bowl turned over. Time repeats itself for months on end. My mind wants for disruption and lands on oranges. An orange in the snow is a blazing flame. Then to fill the bedroom with fruit that goes uneaten. I see the waste and lie to myself. I hold an orange to my mouth to find it as bright as the orange I throw away. How to choose between accumulation and want, having convinced myself want is the same thing as loss. I peel the labels from tin after tin of tomatoes, take a nail and strike my own design, hold it up to the light and say lantern, say constellation. The trick is to take a thing you love and make some holes. Let some light in. Let some water out. If you can believe it, our heads are filled with water. Our skulls are bowls for holding. And bone being part water too, the bowl allows the brain to weep. I wake to oranges in the bed, each one gone to rot. It doesn't upset me. With a little patience, a little time, like stars, hundreds of stone blue spots will soon appear.
You have been listening to Alison Braid-Fernandez, who joined me from London, England. Alison has appeared in many literary journals. Her chapbook, Little Hunches, was published by Anstruther Press in 2020. She is presently working on a short story collection, Look Both Ways and Other Stories. Alison's website address is alisonbraid-fernandez.com, where you will find her details. A podcast of this episode is available for listening or download at writersradio.ca, where you can also sign up for our free program announcement newsletter. Ingrid Rose of Vancouver is my wonderful co-producer of editorial content for Writers Radio. Gary Sill produces original music and tech support for each program and is truly the backbone of this series. Thanks for listening.
You have been listening to Writers Radio, a non-commercial collaborative project which presents talented writers reading their own work. These stories, essays, and conversations revisit the long tradition of oral storytelling that connects us to the inspiration behind the words. Be sure to check the website, writersradio.ca, to subscribe to our free notifications list. It's also a way of letting the writers know you are there and appreciating their creative work.
Writers Radio broadcasts from Half Moon Bay on the Sunshine Coast in Canada, traditional tribal land of the Sechel Nation of the Coast Salish peoples. We express our gratitude for their wisdom teachings and land stewardship.